A proportion is a statement that two ratios or rates are equal. For example, we can say 5 is to 6, so 5 is to 6, as 10 is to 12. This is to is represented with the fraction bar. So 5 is to 6 is the same as saying 5 over 6. As this is your equal sign, 10 is to 12. And again, is to, that's your fraction bar. So 10 over 12. It says, write the statement 12 diamonds is to 15 rubies as 4 diamonds is to 5 rubies as proportion. Well, we see the 12 diamonds, so that goes up top. There's our 12. And then we see is to, which means fraction bar, 15 rubies on the bottom. And then as, equal sign. And then we see 4 diamonds. Again, that's up top. And then we see is to, that means our fraction bar, 5 rubies. So this is our proportion. Now, how do we determine whether proportions are true? We're going to use cross products or cross multiplication. You may use cross multiplication if you have an equal sign between your fractions. So if there is an equal sign between the fractions or the rates or the ratios, then use cross multiplication, which is the same as saying cross product. So you can cross multiply. Now when we cross multiply, you start with the top numerator, and it's going to multiply the opposite denominator. So A times D. So you have A times D. And then you keep the equal sign. And then you take the other numerator times its opposite denominator. C times B or B times C. Okay? If the left side equals the right side, we say the proportion is true, as is written here. If the left side does not equal the right side, so for example, this time we put the slash through the equal sign, means not equal, then you say the proportion is false. So if they are equal, AB, A times D, if that is equal to B times C, then your proportion is true. If not, then we say it is false. So here's an example. Is the following proportion true? So what we're going to do is do our cross multiplication. So we have 4.1 over 7 equals 2.9 over 5. We're going to cross multiply. So we have 4.1 times 5. And then we're going to do 2.9 times 7. So this should give us 20.5, and then 2.9 times 7, and that gives us 20.3. Are these numbers equal? They are not. They are not equal. Therefore, is this a true proportion? No. It is a false proportion. All right, let's go in our books to page 371. And we're going to look at problem 29. And it says, write each sentence as a proportion, then determine whether the proportion is a true proportion. So it says 8 is to 12 as 4 is to 6. So 8 is to 12 as 4 is to 6. Remember, is to is the fraction bar, and as is the equal sign. So this is how you write your proportion. So this is your proportion. Now we need to know whether or not it is true or false. So we're going to cross multiply. And we have 8 times 6. And we're going to have 4 times 8. So 8 times 6 is 48. And 4 times 12 is 48. These are equal, therefore this proportion is true. The ratio on the left equals the ratio on the right. Okay, let's look at number 33. Now it says 1 8/10 is to 2 as 4 5/10 is to 5. So 1 8/10, let's write that as a decimal. 1 is the whole number. 8/10 means we're going to have 8 in the tenths place, is to fraction bar 2 as equals 4 5/10, so we have 4 5/10, so the 5's in the tenths place, is to 5. So this is your proportion. Now we need to know whether or not it is true or false. So we're going to cross multiply. And we're going to do 1.8 times 5. And we're going to do 4.5 times 2. So 1.8 times 5 is 9. And 4.5 times 2 is 9. These are equal. Therefore, this proportion is true. All right, let's look at number 35. And it says 2/3 is to 1/5 as 2/5 is to 1/9. So 2/3, that's the fraction 2/3, is to is the fraction bar 1/5 as 2/5 is to 1/9. So this is your proportion. Now we need to know if it's true or false. So we're going to cross multiply. So this time we're going to have 2/3, or 2/3, times 1/9. And on the other side, we're going to have 2/5 times 1/5. Multiply them together and you should get 2/27. And for this one, you'll get 2/25. These are not equal, therefore your proportion is false. Okay, so now we know how to write proportions, and we know how to tell whether proportions are true or false. What if we are looking for unknown numbers in our proportion? So when one number of a proportion is unknown, we can use our cross product or your cross multiplication to find the unknown numbers. Here are your steps. Step 1, set the cross products equal to each other. Do that automatically. Step 2, divide the number not multiplied by n by the number multiplied by n. Now I realize that is confusing, so what we're going to do is do some examples and hopefully the steps will be clear. So here's the first example. It says 51 is to 34 as 3 is to n. We do not know what n is. N is unknown to us. So let's find out what n really is. So the first thing we're going to do is our cross multiplication. Now we have 51 times n equals 34 times 3. Automatically put your equal sign in between. So that's step 1. Do your cross product with your equal sign in between. Now 51 times n is just 51n, and that's going to be equal to 34 times 3, which is 102. So now you need to solve for n, and this is what they meant in step 2. You're going to divide by 51. Whatever number is in front of your n, you will divide by it. So divide by 51, divide by 51. These will cancel, leave you with just n. So now you have n is equal to 102 over 51. And of course, you can divide 102 by 51, and you should end up with 2. So n is 2. You can check it by plugging it back in and making sure that the cross products are equal. So here's our little check. Let's do it over here. So check. So we had, I'm going to plug it back into number 1. It was 51, but instead of multiplying by n, now I'm going to multiply it by 2. And on the other side, we had 34 times 3. So 51 times 2 is 102. And then 34 times 3 is also 102. These are equal, therefore n equals 2 is the correct answer. Alright, here's some more examples. We're still looking for n. So this time we have 1 2/3 is to 3 1/4, as n is to 2 3/5. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start my cross multiplication is write all my mixed numbers as improper fractions. So we have 5/3 is to 13/4 as n is to 13/5. Now we can do our cross multiplication. And we have 5/3 times 13/5 equals 13/4 times n. Well, we can simplify the 5s, divide both by 5, and that becomes 1. So this is the same as saying 13 over 3 is equal to 13 over 4 n. Now remember, step 2 says divide by the number in front of n. So who's in front of n? It is 13 over 4. So I'm going to divide by 13 over 4. I'm going to use the fraction bar to represent divide. And I'm going to divide by 13 over 4. These will cancel. And it will leave me with 13 over 3 divided by 13 over 4 equals n. Now, of course, we do not divide our fractions. Instead, we multiply by the reciprocal. So we can multiply by 4 over 13. The 13s will simplify out to be 1. And we end up with n equals 4 over 3. And again, you can check it by plugging it back into the first step and make sure that the left side equals the right side. Alright, let's go in our books to page 371 again. And let's look at number 37. And it says, for each proportion, find the unknown number n. So we have n over 5 equals 6 over 10. And again, we're going to find n, so we're going to do our cross multiplication. So we have n times 10, which is 10n, equals 5 times 6, which is 30. And then we need to solve for n, so we're going to divide by 10, and we have n equals 3. All right, let's try number 39. Now we have negative 18 over 54 equals 3 over n. And again, we're solving for n, so we're going to start by doing a cross multiplication. So we have negative 18n equals 54 times 3, which is 162. Now we're going to divide both sides by negative 18. Remember, divide by whatever number is in front of n, and it is negative 18, so negative 18. So we're going to do 162 divided by negative 18, which should give us negative 9. So n equals negative 9. Okay, let's flip over to page 372. And let's look at number 53. So now we have 1/3 over 3/8, and this is equal to 2/5 over n. So again, we're going to do our cross multiplication. So now we have 1/3 times n, which is 1/3 n, equals 3/8 times 2/5. So we have 1/3 n. And of course, we can simplify the 2 and the 8, divide both by 2. We end up with 3/20. Now, to solve for n, we're going to divide by the number in front of n, which is 1/3. So divide by 1/3. And now we have n equals 3 over 20 divided by 1/3. So remember, we do not divide fractions. Instead, we multiply by the reciprocal. So we're going to end up with n equaling 9 over 20. Okay, so this will conclude our video for 5.2. Please email me if you have any questions.